Welcome, everyone. This is your friend, the DN What If, here with another exciting fanfiction. Today, we're diving into the story of What If Deku's Quirk Made Everyone Afraid? If you enjoy this video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more fanfiction content just like this. Now, let's get started with the fanfic. When Inko Midoriya gave birth to her child, she did not expect him to be glowing. She had thought that her child's quirk would be something related to pyrokinesis, but her baby was glowing in the doctor's arms, sobbing his eyes out. As soon as the baby opened his eyes and looked at his mother, the light shone even brighter, but as quickly as it started, the light faded. Hisashi had been waiting outside the room, but when he saw the glowing, he rushed in to check on his wife and son. "What was that?" Hisashi Midoriya asked, worry creeping into his voice. "It seems to be the boy's quirk," replied a doctor. "Once he turns 4, I'd recommend taking him to see a quirk counselor." Satisfied, Hisashi turned back to his wife, who was now holding their son. "Have you thought of a name for our little guy?" Hisashi asked. He had a few names in mind, but he wanted his wife to pick first. "Yes," Inko replied. "I want to call him Izuku." Inko held her baby close and couldn't help but think of the things her son could do. "Izuku, I just know you're going to do great things." "Sorry, it's not going to happen," Dr. Tsubasa said with a grim look on his face. Inko had taken Izuku to a quirk doctor once he turned 4. They had not seen any signs of a quirk forming outside of the glow Izuku had when he was a baby. "There must be some sort of mistake, doctor," Inko said. "He was glowing when he was born 4 years ago." Beside her sat Izuku, who looked frozen in time. Izuku had wanted to be a hero ever since he saw All Might's debut, but all his friends, including his best friend Kaken, said he needed a quirk to be a hero. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but we ran an X-ray over his foot, and it shows that he has an extra toe joint." Quirks are wildly unpredictable, but one thing that is always constant is the absence of a certain toe joint, one that Izuku has. Dr. Tsubasa explained. "Truthfully, I am not sure about what that glow was when he was born. Perhaps the effect of another quirk." Inko, upset but unable to do anything else, simply said, "Thank you for your time." She bowed before dragging Izuku back into the waiting room to check out. Meanwhile, Dr. Tsubasa flipped a switch under his desk, and a phone rose from a trapdoor on his desk. He got up and closed the blinds to his office and locked the door before calling the number on the phone. "I assume you have a good reason to be calling this number, doctor?" The man on the other end of the phone said. "Of course, my lord. I am calling to let you know that I found the perfect candidate to start Project Nomuon. A quirkless boy, perfect for the first experiment. His name is Izuku Midoriya." "Interesting. Tell me his home address. I'll make sure Kurojiri pays the boy a visit," the man said, an unsettling tone in his voice. "Of course, my lord. This will be the perfect start to your plans, I'm sure." Once Inko and Izuku went back home, Izuku rushed up to his room and slammed the door. Hisashi witnessed the scene and went over to his wife. "What happened over there?" he asked, slightly shaken up over Izuku's reaction. "The doctor said that Izuku is quirkless. I wish I could do something to cheer him up, but I feel so useless." Inko replied, her eyes threatening to burst with tears. She wanted to say something to make her boy feel better, but she didn't know what to say. "We can go up and talk to him. I'm sure he just needs reassurance from us that he can still follow his dreams," Hisashi replied. "Wouldn't it be dangerous for him to be a hero if he's quirkless?" Inko asked. She wanted her baby to follow his dreams, but she also wanted him to be safe. How could he save people if villains can shoot lasers and punch through steel? Of course he can. There may not be any quirkless heroes in Japan, but I've learned that there are quirkless heroes all over the world by talking to my American coworkers," Hisashi exclaimed. He was very insistent on that since quirk discrimination was much more common here than in other countries. "I think the most important thing we can do is prove that him being quirkless doesn't make him useless." "If you say so, but just know that a mother can't help but be worried," she teased. "I could never forget that," Hisashi said, smirking. As the two walked upstairs to their son's room, they could hear the sound of All Might's voice, as well as the sound of sniffling. Inko's heart ached at the sound, but the two pressed on. The pair entered the room and saw Izuku watching All Might's debut video on loop. There were tears pouring out of his eyes, and he had the same look on his face as at the doctor's office. "Oh honey," Inko cooed, scooping her son into her arms as tears started to fall from her eyes. Hisashi stood nearby, trying not to shed tears. "All Might is the coolest. He can save everyone," Izuku said, his voice muffled as he cried into his mom. He looked up at her and said, "Can I be a hero too?" He was trying his best to smile, but the corners of his mouth betrayed him, and tears still threatened to leak as soon as he let his guard down. Inko and Hisashi looked at each other, then back at their son before Hisashi said, "Of course, son. Just because you're quirkless doesn't make you useless. I have no doubt you'll be a great hero someday. You'll have to work harder than the others, but that'll make you even better." Inko replied similarly, saying, "We will support your dreams, no matter what. I know that you can do whatever you set your mind to." Upon hearing the words of his parents, the tears Izuku pushed away came flooding back, and the three started bawling on the spot. After calming down, Inko said, "Why don't we have some katsudon? Your father and I will get it ready, and you can watch some more heroes in the meantime." Izuku's eyes lit up at the idea, and Inko took that as all the confirmation she needed to prepare the meal. "Okay, sweetie. Dinner will be ready in a bit." Inko and Hisashi then left, leaving Izuku by himself. As the two walked downstairs, Hisashi noticed the worried look on his wife's face. "What's wrong, honey?" he asked, worry in his voice. "I just can't help but worry about him. I know we'll support him, but what about the other kids? They may not be as understanding as we are, and I don't want Izuku to be bullied." Inko replied, "Quirkless discrimination is a huge problem in Japan, and kids fear what they don't understand. We'll just have to keep a close eye on him. And if things are truly bad where Izuku is now, we can always find a different school." Hisashi replied, holding his wife's hands as he spoke. "You always know the right things to say, honey," Inko said lovingly. "For now, let's not keep Izuku y-. Inko was cut off when she heard screaming from Izuku's room. Dad, help!" Izuku screamed. The pair quickly dashed upstairs and hastily entered their son's room. They saw a black portal taking their son as he struggled, tears in his eyes. "Izuku, kiddo?" Inko and Hisashi yelled, running up to the portal to try and grab their child. Despite their best effort, though, the portal closed, leaving the two of them alone in their baby's room. Inko doubled over and started sobbing as Hisashi ran over to the phone to call the police. As Izuku's parents left his room, he couldn't help but feel an overwhelming joy in his heart. "They believe in me. I can be just like All Might." As he thought this, he turned back to watch more All Might clips. For as long as Izuku could remember, he had wanted to be a hero. A hero like All Might who could make people smile just by showing up. The boy thought his dreams were crushed when the doctor said he was quirkless, but he knew his parents would let him follow his dream. As Izuku was watching, he felt a cold presence enter his room. He looked around but didn't see anything until a small black portal opened in his room. Looking in awe, he saw a man in a suit who was fully made of clouds step into his room. Izuku could tell the man was trouble, but before he could move, the walking cloud spoke. "I take it you are Izuku Midoriya?" The man asked, his yellow eyes narrowing. How do you know who I am?" Izuku responded hesitantly, slowing getting up from his seat. "Master has need of you, so I'm afraid you'll be coming with me," the man said ominously. With a flick of his hand, a portal opened up behind Izuku. The boy's eyes widened as he ducked under a shove meant to push him away. Izuku made a beeline to the door. "If I can just get Mom and Dad, they can protect me," he thought to himself. Dad, help!" he screamed, trying to get to the door. As he reached for the handle, he felt a hand on his shoulder drag him towards the portal. "You cannot escape me, Izuku Midoriya," the Shadow Man said. The last thing Izuku saw before entering the portal was his parents bursting through the door. Izuku wasn't even able to adjust to the new location, as he was knocked unconscious as soon as he entered. "Is this the kid, Doctor?" a tall man with white hair asked. "It is. Good job as always, Kurojiiri," The doctor responded. Kurogiri bowed before moving away from the table. I'm surprised you were able to find a quirkless kid doctor. They've been increasingly hard to find as of late. The man with white hair mused. I'm quite surprised myself, sir. I would be lying if I said I was expecting this. The doctor replied, grinning with anticipation. For now, we'll need to get our little friend here awake. The man with white hair nodded before placing a hand on top of the kid. Instantly, the green-haired boy woke up, his eyes adjusting to the new scenery. Looking around, Izuku saw that he was in a dimly lit room. There was one exit at the back of the room, and the walls were lined with test tubes, pipes, and surgical equipment. The room smelled of metal, but Izuku couldn't pinpoint where the smell was coming from. Izuku tried to move, but he quickly realized that he was strapped onto a table. Who are you people? Let me go! Izuku begged, fighting against his restraints. The man with white hair chuckled and turned to the doctor. You've picked quite the feisty one, good doctor. Then the man turned around and faced Izuku. You may call me All for One, but soon you'll be referring to me as Master. Izuku could feel the aura of fear the man All for One had. The sound of the man's voice was enough to freeze Izuku in place. The man turned around to face the person he was talking to earlier. Doctor, is the binding quirk ready? Yes, my lord. The doctor replied, rolling over a large test tube that appeared to have someone inside. Izuku's mind was racing at a mile per minute. Did he say quirk? Is he giving me a quirk? How is that possible? His thoughts were stopped when he noticed the man turn towards him again, grinning madly. Don't worry, boy. The man said. This will hurt you much more than it will hurt me. Izuku could only stare in horror as the man's lifeless white eyes slowly approached. A hand reached out to grab onto Izuku's face. Izuku closed his eyes, preparing for the worst, but as soon as he closed his eyes, he saw a bright light. Whenever Izuku closed his eyes, he could always see light from people, but this one was so beautiful. A rainbow of color, surrounded in red. It's so pretty, Izuku thought to himself. In a cautious motion, he reached out to grab the light and hold it close to himself. On the outside, All for One noticed Izuku's eyes lit up. Odd, he thought. This boy was supposed to be quirkless, but before he could dwell on it further, the boy's eyes opened. 2 tendrils came from Izuku's eyes and latched onto All for One, startling him. The tendrils let go, and Izuku's body lit up like a firework, clouding the room in a bright light. All for One prepared rivet stab, intending to kill the boy, but before he could launch the attack, the light stopped. All for One looked back at the table, expecting to see Izuku still there, but the boy was gone. A boy with blue hair, seeing the light coming from the room, walked in to see All for One, the doctor, and Kurogiri shocked. What the hell happened here? It looks like you all just failed the main objective. Inko and Hisashi were waiting anxiously for news about their son. They called the police 3 hours ago when he was taken, but so far nothing has happened. They had to have hoped that the heroes knew what they were doing, but every minute that passed was agony. Don't worry, honey. I'm sure that the police and heroes will find Izuku soon. Hisashi said, hoping to cheer his wife up. He was just as heartbroken as her, but he wanted to have faith in the heroes. I know, but what if they can't find him? What if something awful happens to him? Inko said, we just have to put our trust in the authorities. Hisashi replied. This wasn't the answer Inko wanted. The two could only hug each other as they waited for anything about their son. Hisashi noticed how quiet the house was without their boy, the once boisterous room now eerily empty. Out of the corner of his eye, though, he saw something. It looked like an orb made of light. Inko noticed it too, and the two watched as the orb slowly floated over beside Inko and landed on the couch. Suddenly, the orb expanded, encasing the room in its majestic glow. Inko and Hisashi covered their eyes, attempting to move away but knocking down some objects on the coffee table in the process. The light dimmed before stopping. The two looked over, and standing in place of the orb was their son, shaken but otherwise unharmed. Mama? Papa? Izuku said, blinking a few times to make sure he wasn't just seeing things. Inko and Hisashi paused for a moment before rushing over and embracing their son, showering the boy in their love and tears. Unbeknownst to them, a red light started to trickle from Izuku's hand, pulling something from his mother. Quirk, imprint. The quirk first activates immediately upon seeing someone once the user is born, setting that person as a protector. The quirk activates again once the user absorbs the light of the quirk of someone else, copying it and allowing the copier to use it. After this, the user is transported instantly to their protector, if they are already not within 10 meters of them. Shortly after Izuku was back, Hisashi went to call the police to tell them their son was home while Inko and Izuku remained to clean up the mess. Almost everything was cleaned up, but there were a few more objects still on the ground, one of which was a good distance away from where the two were. Inko got up to grab it, but Izuku quickly got up. "Don't worry, Mom. I'll get it." Izuku went over to grab the cup on the ground, but as he stretched out his arm to grab it, the cup started floating on its own. Izuku and Inko both looked in disbelief. After staring into space for exactly 5 seconds, the two started screaming. Inko ran over and held her son close while Izuku cried tears of joy. "What's going on?" Hisashi said. He ran in expecting the worst, but all he saw was his son using a quirk. He slowly walked over before hugging him and his wife, joining them in the Midoriya waterworks. As the tears slowly came to an end, Inko figured she would also use her quirk to speed up the cleaning. Focusing on a nearby pencil, she tried to reach for her quirk, only to find out that it wasn't there anymore. It was a hollow feeling, like something that was a part of her disappeared without a trace. She looked over and saw her baby playing with his quirk, a quirk very similar, if not the same, as her own. It didn't take long to put 2 and 2 together. "Izuku." She spoke. "I don't think your quirk is telepathy." Izuku looked confused hearing her say that. After all, the evidence is right in front of them. Before he could say anything, Inko spoke again. "I think your quirk might be to take quirks." The Midoriya household was in a bit of a pickle upon realizing this. While Inko didn't use her quirk for anything, since she wasn't a hero, this brought up concerns over how much control Izuku has. The trio began brainstorming on how the quirk worked. When Inko asked her son what the feeling was like when he took her quirk, he replied saying that it felt like he was absorbing something into his skin. Upon making this realization, Izuku figured he could reverse the pull. Instead of his quirk being a vacuum, he could make it like a fan. He tried this and it worked like a charm. After around 10 seconds of trying, Izuku was able to give his mother's quirk back. The Midoriyas then went over to get Izuku's quirk registered. After some experimentation, the counselor gave Izuku's quirk the name Quirk Manipulation, before giving them some resources for Izuku, since his quirk is so different from his parents. After arriving back home, Izuku ran over to his mom. "Mom, can you see if Kaken is available to play? I want to show him my quirk." Inko chuckled at the enthusiasm radiating off the boy. "Of course, sweetie. Let me call your Auntie Mitsuki and see if Katsuki is available." As Izuku watched his mother walk over to the phone, he felt a surge of confidence. "Once I show Kaken my quirk, he will be super happy. I won't be Deku anymore." Since Izuku had gotten his quirk later than usual, his friends elected to call him Deku, an alternate spelling of his first name, as well as meaning useless. But Izuku isn't useless, not anymore. Izuku put his thoughts on hold once his mother came back. Mitsuki said that Katsuki is playing with some other boys over in the forest you two love to hang out by. Inko explained. Izuku jumped upon hearing this, quickly running to put on his shoes. He said a quick goodbye to his parents before leaving. "This is it, Izuku. You can prove to them that you aren't Deku anymore." Izuku walked up to where his friends were playing. Katsuki was the first to notice the green-haired boy's arrival, looking over and waving. "Hey Deku, got a quirk yet?" Katsuki said with a smirk, the other boys snickering at the remark. None of them really expected Izuku to get a quirk. "I did, Kaken. It appeared last night, and I can't wait to show you because it's really on dash," Izuku said, quickly going off on a tangent. The other boys looked shocked. Finally, Katsuki spoke up. "Slow down, nerd. What do you mean you got a quirk?" he said. Izuku's eyes gleamed with excitement as he explained his quirk. "My quirk is called Quirk Manipulation. It allows me to give and take other people's quirks, no matter what it is. Isn't it just the coolest? Izuku looked back at the other boys, expecting to see acceptance in their eyes, but he only saw that in his best friend. Demon nerd, that's a pretty good quirk. Almost as good as mine. Bakugo said. Izuku was overflowing with joy hearing this. His best friend accepted his quirk, and he even said it's powerful. Looking over at the others, Izuku expected them to be just as nice as his blonde friend, but he didn't see the same excitement as Bakugo. They looked tense, as if Izuku just said he kicked a puppy. No one said anything until he heard a voice. Sounds like a villain's quirk to me. Looking over at the origin of the voice, Izuku saw that a boy with wings said that. What? Izuku stuttered. Yeah, looks like you went from a useless Deku to a villain Deku. A boy with a finger quirk sneered. The others started snickering at that remark, leaving Izuku to question himself. Why couldn't they just see how cool his quirk was? Better than what they have anyways. Maybe he should just kitty them and... What was that? Looking past whatever that thought was, Izuku looked at his best friend, expecting the same reaction, but to his surprise, Bakugo looked upset at them. What are you extras talking about? Deku's quirk ain't villainous. Bakugo said, glaring at the others. You can't be serious, right? One of them said. Of course I'm serious. Bakugo replied. The quirk doesn't make the person, and Deku wants to be a hero more than everyone else here, except me of course. Bakugo then turned to his friend. Come on nerd. I bet the hag will be happy to see you. Bakugo then walked away, with Izuku closely following behind. The green-haired boy almost couldn't believe what he had heard, but he wasn't about to tempt fate. So, he followed Bakugo to his house, and the two played heroes until Izuku had to go back to his house. 10 years later, Izuku and Bakugo still had dreams of being heroes. After Izuku had shown Bakugo his quirk, at the blonde's request, the two became inseparable. However, word spread quickly, so as soon as the rest of the school found out about Izuku's quirk, they distanced themselves from him. This later progressed into teasing, then shoving, and finally bullying. Even though Bakugo would try his best to get the attackers to back off, he couldn't be around his friend always. Those days ended up being the worst for Izuku. The bullies knew they could do whatever they wanted to Izuku without any consequences. The teachers didn't care, and the only person who would defend Izuku was Bakugo. Today was one of those days. Hey Deku! A boy with a finger quirk sneered. Izuku simply rolled his eyes. Can't help but notice your boyfriend isn't around today. You finally scare him off. The other two boys started laughing after the finger quirk user said that. Izuku simply rolled his eyes and got up. He made his way to the door, but he was stopped by another boy, one with an eye-extending quirk. Rude of you to walk away from us when we're just trying to have a conversation. You really are a villain in the making. The boy said, grinning from ear to ear. The other two encircled Izuku, preparing to throw punches, but one notices an object sticking out of Izuku's yellow backpack. Upon closer look, he found that it was a notebook titled, Hero Notebook for the Future 13. Seeing this, he gets an idea. What's this? Hero Notebook? Still trying to be a hero, huh? The boy says, pulling the notebook out of the boy's backpack. Feeling the removal of his notebook, Izuku quickly turns around to try and grab it, but he is too slow. The taller boy with wings holds the notebook too high for Izuku to reach, mocking him in the process. Still trying to be a hero, huh Deku? No one's gonna want a demon villain to save them. The boy said. Izuku just looked down, trying to make himself small. Seems like you're understanding now, so I'll help you with some of the cleanup. Upon saying this, the winged boy threw the notebook out the open window into the pond below. Izuku stood there with a grim expression on his face, but otherwise he said nothing. You want some advice? Take a swan dive out the window and hope for a better quirk in the next life. Before Izuku could say anything, he and his cronies were already out the door, cackling as they left. Stupid fish, that's not food. Izuku muttered as he grabbed his notebook, shaking it off before putting it in his backpack. As he prepared to walk home, he felt a buzz in his pocket. Looking at the message, he sees that it's from Bakugo. Kaken, hey nerd, meet me over by that bridge near school. Kaken, I got something I want to tell you about. Izuku was quick to agree and he started to walk over there. As he trekked over to the spot, Izuku couldn't help but think about what those boys said. He didn't get how his quirk was villainous. It had the potential to be amazing for hero work, so why was everyone so scared? Maybe I should give them something to fear. Maybe if I just TKE their quirks they'll understand. TKE it. TKE them. TKE it all. TKE. 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 Izuku shook his head, trying to get the thoughts to go away. But they didn't stop. The words just kept getting louder and louder. TKE. TKIT. TKITL. Shut up. Izuku screamed, holding his head as he tried to make the voice stop. That's the one thing Izuku could never figure out about his quirk. The urge to take. It was never this bad though. Ever since Izuku's quirk awoke, his head has always been loud. It would usually die down whenever he took Kaken's quirk, but after a few days the urge would come crawling back, like a cockroach that refused to die. Izuku rounded the corner and saw his friend, who was leaning on the bridge. Took you long enough, nerd. Bakugo shouted. Hey Kaken. Izuku called, happy to see his friend after the day he had. Kaken smirked upon hearing the glee in his friend's voice, but that smirk quickly faded as Izuku got closer. They were bullying you again, weren't they? Kaken said, small hints of concern underlying his usually smug voice. Izuku's breaking of eye contact was all the confirmation Bakugo needed to see he was right. Look at that. You can't keep letting those extras walk all over you. I can't always be there to protect you, you know. He wasn't wrong. The bullies were more aggressive than usual today, but it wasn't as simple as just standing up for himself. Kaken, if I do anything that might seem aggressive, they'll just double down on calling me a villain. Izuku said sadly. There are only a few months left in middle school anyways. After that, you and I will be going to UA. Izuku exclaimed. If there's one thing Izuku is great at, it's lifting the mood. Bakugo's usual grin appeared shortly after Izuku's speech. That's actually what I wanted to talk to you about, nerd. Bakugo said. We need to start training if you want a chance of getting in. Your quirk is great, but it's just a backbone. You need to get some more quirks if you want to get stronger, and I think I know just the place. Izuku looked at his friend with stars in his eyes. It's almost too good to be true that the strongest person he knows wants to help him get stronger. But just as Bakugo was starting to say his plan, Izuku heard something. It sounded like a sewer grate shaking. Izuku shifted to see what was causing the noise. It was dark under the bridge, but he could swear that there was a strange black goo underneath the vent. What are you looking at, Deku? Bakugo asked, turning around to look at the grate too. Suddenly, the grate flew upwards, slamming into the top of the bridge. Out of the sewer, a being made purely of sludge surfaced. What's this? 2 flesh suits, ripe for the taking? It must be my lucky day. The sludge villain said. Its 2 large eyes scanned the boys before landing on Bakugo. I think I'll take the blonde brat. He looks stronger. Like hell you're gonna take me, and villain. Bakugo shouted, lighting small sparks on his hands. The intimidation didn't seem to work, however. The sludge villain simply laughed before launching itself over to Bakugo. The boy tried to land an explosion on the sludge, but the villain was able to slip by, latching onto Bakugo. In the blink of an eye, the sludge villain surrounded Bakugo, slowly climbing into Bakugo as the boy tried to claw it off. Struggle all you want, kid. It ain't gonna do you any good. The sludge villain laughed, slowly pouring itself into Bakugo. The explosive boy tried fighting, but his explosions couldn't hit anything. Slowly his screams muffled as the sludge started filling his mouth. Izuku was standing there as the scene unfolded, staring in horror as his childhood friend was being taken over. His pupils were shaking as the life was slowly being drained out of Bakugo. Izuku stood there frozen, unable to do anything to help. He closed his eyes, the words all his peers would call him rushed back into his head. Useless. Deku. Freak. Villain scum. TKE. Izuku's eyes opened. He had to save Kaken no matter the cost. If that meant TNG, then so be it. Looking into Kaken's eyes, Izuku saw the look of someone who desperately needed to be saved. So he ran. He ran as fast as he could towards his friend, not even realizing he was moving as he did. The sludge villain saw Izuku running and prepared a counterattack, but Izuku quickly shifted his backpack off his shoulders and threw it at the villain's big orange eye. The man shrieked in pain, slightly letting go of Bakugo in the process. Izuku jumped up, kicking Bakugo out of the sludge and landing on top of the villain. Izuku felt his quirk tugging at his hands, begging to be used. In that moment, his control slipped, and he felt the familiar feeling of power slipping between bodies. In only a second, Izuku had taken sludge, leaving behind a naked and shaking man. "WW, how are you?" he said shakily. Izuku opened his mouth to say something, but the man ran away, stumbling as he adapted to no longer having his quirk. "Yeah, that's right. You better run," Bakugo shouted. He then turned to Izuku, who looked shaken up. "You good nerd? I feel like I should be asking you that." Izuku chuckled. "I have this bad headache all of a sudden. Might be from using my quirk for the first time in a decade. Thuff maybates because mibadi I suggesting to and dash." Izuku's speech slowly devolved into a full mutter storm, annoying Bakugo. "I asked how you were doing, not for your DMN life story," Bakugo quipped, jabbing Izuku's head. This snapped Izuku out of the muttering. He sheepishly scratched the back of his head as he apologized. Suddenly, the vent cover started shaking again, quickly gaining the two boys' attention. They hastily entered a fighting stance, preparing themselves for the next threat to come out of the sewers. "Not again," Bakugo muttered, lighting sparks on his hands. Izuku didn't say anything, but it was obvious from the look in his face that he wasn't ready for a fight. The sewer grate flew up to the ceiling of the bridge again, but Izuku and Bakugo didn't expect to see what came out. "Ha ha ha!" the voice exclaimed. A large figure in red, yellow, and blue jumped out of the sewers. "Fear not, for I am here. All Might!" Izuku and Bakugo both shouted. "Hello, boys. Sorry I'm late. These sewer systems are not easy to navigate," All Might exclaimed. The boys just stood there mumbling incoherent thoughts. Their inspiration was standing right there, how could they not? I was on the tail of a dangerous slime villain. "Did either of you two boys see where he went?" All Might asked. Izuku tensed at the question, remembering how he stole the villain's quirk. Bakugo noticed this and chimed in. "The demon villain ran that way, towards the city. I saw him deactivate his quirk, but he still has some sludge on him. The bastard has white and green hair, and he is missing a tooth on his upper jaw," Bakugo said nonchalantly. All Might nodded at the explanation. "Thank you, young man. I'll now be heading off to catch that villain," All Might exclaimed, flashing his signature smile. Izuku's thought finally caught up to him, and he realized he had a very important question to ask his idol. "All Might wait," Izuku exclaimed. All Might turned around to see what the boy wanted. "I have an important question to ask you." All Might nodded in confirmation, prompting Izuku to continue. "All my life I wanted to help people with it. Smile on my face, but my peers would always laugh at me because of my quirk. They think it's a villain's quirk, but I know it can do so much good. Please, All Might, tell me if I can still be a hero, even with my villainous quirk." Izuku tensed upon finally asking his question, but he was surprised by All Might's response. "Young man, while I'm not too sure what your quirk is, I do know that there's no such thing as a villainous quirk. There are only villainous people. If you strive to be a hero, then go for it. Prove to yourself and to your classmates that you have what it takes. Young man, you can be a hero." Izuku broke down in tears upon hearing the confirmation he needed. All Might patted Izuku on the head before dashing towards where Bakugo said the villain ran off to. Once All Might was gone, Bakugo looked to Izuku, who was wiping away tears. "Done crying, nerd?" Bakugo said, teasing his friend. Izuku only nodded, allowing Bakugo to continue. "As I was saying before we were interrupted, I have an idea on how to get you some more quirks." Bakugo pulled a flyer out of his pocket. The paper simply had an address, along with the description, "Underground Fighting Ring." "What is that, Kaken?" Izuku asked. "Found it crumpled up in a dumpster near my house. Figured it could be a good way to get you some new firepower for your arsenal." Izuku stared wide-eyed at his best friend, But instead of arguing, Izuku nodded. What better place was there to get quirks undetected than an underground fighting ring? Odi Manto ran as fast as his legs would take him. He didn't even care that he was naked, he just needed to get away from that thing. He didn't even know what it was, but it somehow was able to get rid of his sludge form. Manto had never been able to turn his quirk off for as long as he had it, but that green-haired kid was able to. It wasn't turned off. Manto couldn't even feel the sludge quirk in his body anymore. It was like it was never there to begin with. Whatever that kid did, it took his quirk away from him. That was currently the second most terrifying thought Manto had. The first place spot was taken by his current situation. The whole reason he wanted a flesh suit was to get out of the country. With all might on his tail, he needed to get out. Now he needed a new plan. Walking into an alleyway, he found an old towel he could use to cover himself with. Not the best option, but beggars can't be choosers. Heading deeper into the alley, Manto found a door, slightly cracked open. Peering inside, he saw a dimly lit room. The room was tattered, as if there was a fight inside that destroyed the contents of the area. There was a strange symbol on the back wall, one that Manto didn't recognize. Must be an old gang hideout. Manto thought. He went inside, ignoring the foul stench as he looked around for anything useful. The place seemed abandoned, but a worn-down box in the corner caught his eye. Opening it, he found a handgun in mint condition. Manto debated whether to take the gun or not, but he figured that the gang this place originally belonged to wouldn't mind him taking one measly handgun, so he grabbed it out of the box, making sure to grab some ammo and test it to make sure it works. Perfect, he thought, a grin appearing on his face. Now, Manto needed money to get overseas. Tsuyu Azui was currently bored out of her mind. But her father had somehow convinced her to come with him to the bank he works at in Mizudafu. Her father, Ganma Azui, figured it would be helpful for her to see what other jobs were like if the hero business didn't work out. Tsuyu was already set on being a hero, though, so this was just a waste of time. The two were currently behind the counter, with Ganma showing her the intricacies of bank work, when they heard a commotion at the entrance. Intrigued, Tsuyu steps out to see what happened, but she immediately froze at the sight. There was a man in nothing but a towel robbing the bank with a handgun. He had at least 3 people as hostages. A bank teller behind the counter was panicking, but another seemed to have activated the emergency alarm. The sound of police sirens could be heard in the distance, and a few pro-heroes were already outside, attempting to find a way in. It was hard to hear what they were saying, but from what Tsuyu could pick up, they were talking about how none of them had the right quirks for the situation. Hurry up! The criminal shouted towards a bank worker who was loading cash wads into a bag. The tension in the air could be cut by a butter knife, and the heroes were in a tricky situation. The police had finally arrived at the scene, and the hostage negotiations were underway, but it was clear that whatever they were saying to the man was not getting through to him. In fact, the man was seething in rage. He ped the gun and pointed it at one of the people he had hostage. The hostage started crying, begging for his life, but the criminal had no sympathy. In that moment, Tsuyu knew what would happen. The man would die, and there was a good chance the criminal would get the money and run away. In a flash, Tsu found herself leaping towards the hostage, and before she could even think, she swatted at the gun with her tongue, hoping to knock it out of the perpetrator's hand. The gun fired away from the man, the bullet lodging itself in a counter to the left. However, the gun was still in the criminal's hand. The criminal recovered from the shock of the surprise attack and threw a punch at Tsuyu, who still had momentum from the initial jump to intercept the gun. The punch landed squarely in Tsuyu's jaw, launching her away from the hostages. Groaning, Tsuyu attempted to get back up, but she felt the foot of the criminal on her chest pushing her back to the ground. The man had a sick laugh and pointed the gun at Tsuyu. "Any last words, little girl?" the man said, pressing down harder on Tsuyu. Tsuyu wanted to say something, anything. She wanted to apologize to her dad for getting herself killed. She wanted to curse the man about to kill her. She wants to say one last thing to her siblings. But no words came out. She didn't have the strength to speak. Tsuyu closed her eyes, waiting for the moment the gun fires. Bang! Tsuyu flinches at the sound, bracing for impact. The pain never came. Hesitantly, Tsuyu opened her eyes to see the criminal fires straight into the sky. She saw a large hand on the man's arm, and looking towards it revealed the source of the hand, All Might. All Might ran in the direction the young blonde man said the villain ran off to. Entering the city, he looked for any sign of the villain, but there was nothing. He looked around, asking civilians if they saw anything. After asking around, he found out that witnesses saw a naked man running into an alleyway, muttering something about getting out of the country. He ran in, finding a door covered in a bit of the sludge. Going inside, All Might could see that the place belonged to some sort of gang, but it was abandoned some time ago. Looking on the table, All Might saw an empty weapon box. The villain must have taken a gun from here. If he wants to leave the country, he would need money. All Might thought to himself. Suddenly his eyes widened. He remembered that there is a bank nearby. As he prepared to dash out, steam collected around his body. Sheet! All Might deflated, looking like a skeleton with flesh still attached to the bones. Despite this, All Might knew he needed to help. He ran out of the building, towards the bank closest to the alleyway. As he was running, he called an old friend, Detective Tsukachi, to let him know that Muzutafu General Bank is likely to be robbed and to send officers. Making it to the bank, All Might saw a grim situation. The villain, now without sludge covering him, had 3 hostages. The police and heroes were making no progress in calming him down. If anything, the villain looked angrier. All Might's eyes widened as the villain stepped down on one of the hostages, preparing to kill him. Damn it. If only I wasn't out of time, I could stop him. All Might looked at the scene unfolding, unable to keep his eyes from watching. When All looked grim, out of the corner of his eye, he was a flash of pink. A young girl with green hair ran up and smacked the gun, causing it to fire away from the man. All Might stood there in shock. This young girl risked her life to save that man. She put everything into keeping him alive. And here I am, saying I can't be a hero just because of some stupid time limit. All Might slowly reinflated himself and charged in, saving the girl just before she could be shot. The last few hours felt like a blur to Tsu. After the bank robbing incident, she was reprimanded by the heroes on site for being reckless. Tsu rolled her eyes hearing that. They were the reason she needed to be reckless, after all. Then, she was taken into a clinic to make sure she wasn't injured. Then, the police needed to take her in for questioning. At that point, Tsuyu had told her father to go home instead of waiting for her, saying she could take the train home after this is all over. After some questioning and more reprimanding, Tsuyu found herself walking to the train station. It was basically dark by this point, with only a hint of orange still left in the sky. As she approached a crosswalk, a large figure zoomed in front of her. I am here, approaching like a normal person. The figure, now easily identified as All Might, said. Tsuyu's eyes widened slightly. All Might, she said. That's right, young heir. All Might said before realizing he didn't know her name. Tsuyu Azui, Ribbit. Tsuyu spoke. Young Esui then. I wanted to ask you some questions if you wouldn't mind. All Might said. Tsuyu thought for a moment. The train for Aichi didn't leave for another half an hour, so she figured she had time to talk. Also, this is All Might. Sure. Tsuyu replied. Great. All Might said excitedly. First, I wanted to ask you what you want to do in the future. Tsuyu thought for a moment before speaking. Well, sir, I want to be a hero, Ribbit. It's been my goal for as long as I can remember. All Might's smile grew before asking his next question. Great. My next question is this. What exactly were you thinking during the bank robbing situation? All Might said. Tsuyu opened her mouth to reply, but All Might quickly added something. Don't worry, I'm not here to reprimand you or anything. I simply want to know your thought process. Upon hearing the clarification, Tsuyu thought for a bit before speaking. Well, I wish I could give a satisfying answer, but I don't think I can, Ribbit. My body moved before my mind could even think of something to do. Sorry if this is disappointing, Ribbit. Nonsense. That answer makes perfect sense to me. I've heard stories about how the greatest heroes we've seen realized they wanted to be heroes, and one thing each story has in common is that their bodies moved before their minds could tell them what to do. All Might said, earning a smile from the frog girl. After hearing it for myself, I think I can say with confidence that you will be an amazing hero. However, I wanted to offer something of my own to help. Tsuyu wanted to question what All Might had said, but she let him finish first. What I am about to show you is a national secret, so under no circumstances can you tell anybody what you see. Tsuyu opened her mouth to ask a question, but she was interrupted by a burst of steam that came from All Might. Once the smoke cleared, she saw a shorter skeleton in place of All Might. Tsuyu instinctively jumped back a bit. All Might? Where did you go? Are you some sort of fake All Might? Tsu asked. All Might? Chuckled briefly before answering. I am in fact All Might. Around 5 years ago, a dangerous villain gave me an almost fatal wound in my stomach. He lifted his shirt to show her the scar. I was able to take down that villain, but in the process, got this injury. I can only do hero work for around 3 hours a day now, which is why I have been looking for a successor. He looked at Tsuyu, who was still in shock from what she had just heard. After what I saw today, I want to make you my successor. You showed the heart of a true hero, something I have not seen in anyone else so far. Additionally, I want to give you my quirk. All Might continued. The last part about All Might's quirk seemed to have broken Tsuyu out of her trance. Wait, you want to give me your quirk? How is that even possible? Tsu asked. My quirk is a special one. Whenever interviewers asked me what my quirk is, I would always laugh it off and tell a joke before changing the subject. The true name of my quirk is One for All. This quirk was made over 200 years ago and has been passed down through generations of users until reaching me. I am the 8th bearer, and I want to make you the 9th. Tsuyu listened in awe. A quirk that could be transferred? That should be impossible, but if All Might is saying it's true, then it must be. So, young Azui, will you accept my quirk and become my successor? All Might asked, looking towards Tsuyu again. Tsuyu stood there like a deer in headlights. The number 1 hero was offering his quirk to her. How could she possibly reject that? Besides, she could be an even better hero with the quirk of the current number 1. Thinking about every possibility, Tsuyu made her choice. I'll do it, Ribbit. I'll be your successor. Kaken, are you sure this is the right place? Izuku asked. The duo currently stood outside a rundown building in the red light district. The tall building was cracked all over and had boarded up windows. You know any other buildings with this address? Bakugo asked. Izuku prepared to counter, but the words died in his throat. Relenting, Izuku simply shook his head. Thought so. The two walked towards the building. Izuku was becoming more and more unsure of their decision with each step, but it was too late to turn back now. Izuku would get stronger, and nothing would get in his way. The two entered the building. As Bakugo looked at the flyer for any instructions, Izuku took in the sights. The building looked no better on the inside. The boy was surprised that the building still had structural integrity. Used needles and cigars littered the floors, and the area was decorated with moldy furniture. Okay, so we need to knock on the back wall and state our names. Then they'll let us in. Izuku nodded and prepared to walk over to the wall, but he was stopped by Bakugo. I'm doing the talking, nerd. But I could do a great job. Izuku questioned. Bakugo simply rolled his eyes before responding. Deku, you can barely hold a conversation with people who aren't me and Auntie Inko. What makes you think you can handle this? Izuku, pretending to be hurt, put a hand on his chest and gasped. You wound me, Kaken. Izuku giggled quietly at the joke. Bakugo was not impressed. The two walked over to the back wall, and Bakugo knocked loudly on the wall. Names? A voice from behind the wall asked. C4 and Green Bean. Bakugo replied. Izuku gave his friend a confused. Bakugo mouthed, just go with it. Izuku shrugged and listened in again. I mean real names. The man impatiently stated. You think we're dumb enough to give you our real names? Just let us in already. Bakugo shouted, annoyed. The man on the other side of the wall scoffed before placing his hands on the wall and muttering something too quiet for the boys to hear. After the man stopped talking, a green swirl appeared on the wall in front of the boys. The swirl formed an oval large enough for them to walk through, and as soon as the swirl stopped, The portal became see-through. Looking in, they saw the man they were talking to as well as the fighting ring in the distance. The whole area looked massive, or at the very least way too big to fit into this one building. Izuku looked like a kid in a candy shop upon seeing the man's quirk. Whoa, a portal quirk. Those are really rare. I wonder if he can choose where the portals go or how many to create. Is there a limit? How far can each portal take you? Are the portals always green or can they be any color? I wonder if he could be willing to answer my questions, because he has a really cool quirk and dash. As Izuku was muttering, the man looked at the green-haired boy in confusion. Does he usually do this? The man asked. Bakugo shrugged. Yeah, this is normal. We'll get out of your hair. Bakugo grabbed Izuku's shirt and dragged him through the portal, Izuku muttering the whole way. The man stood there in silence before closing the portal. Bakugo flicked Izuku on the forehead, and the boy broke out his muttering trance. Where are we? He asked. If you weren't lost in your head, you would know. We're sitting in front of the ring. Izuku looked around and was taken aback by how in-depth this place was. The center of the room had the fighting ring. A large cage hung over the ring that would lower during a match. Above the cage was a large electronic display of the current fight. The ring was surrounded by bleachers full of spectators. 4 hallways led from the ring into the circular lobby that surrounded the fighting area. The lobby had bathrooms, preparation rooms for the fighters, food stalls, and a desk where you could place bets on the fights. As Izuku was looking around, he heard the announcer call the end of a match. A woman with spikes all across his arms had just beaten a man with 2 long tendrils coming out of his back. Izuku kept an eye on the tendrils man, as it seemed that he had already lost a lot of fights. Izuku was not as oblivious as many people would assume, so he could see the audience reaction to the tendril man's loss. The crowd had looks of disappointment on their faces. Izuku could hear whispers of how poorly the man was doing. From the booth next to him, he even heard a man tell his buddy that the tendril man's boss was not going to be happy. Izuku told what he saw and heard to Bakugo, who nodded and told him to keep watching. Sure enough, the next time the tendrils man stepped up to fight, he was getting destroyed. Upon seeing this, Izuku and Bakugo got up and went into the lobby in search of the man's locker room. It didn't take long to find it, as it was labeled with his quirk, tendrils. Now all the 2 needed to do was wait. Takano was having a bad day. Scratch that, he was having a terrible day. He was supposed to be the ring's champion, but he was taking loss after loss. His quirk, tendrils, is really versatile and was able to catch the eyes of a powerful gang. The boss gave him a chance to prove his worth, but he couldn't even do that. There was no doubt in his mind that the big man was said. Sighing, Takano hobbled over to his locker room and turned on the sink, splashing his face with water. He needed a plan, or at the very least a scapegoat. Suddenly, he heard the door open. He quickly turned around, but instead of the big man, he saw 2 kids. One had spiky blonde hair, and the other had green hair and freckles. What are you brats doing here? This ain't the bathroom. Takano growled. The kid with blonde hair scoffed before speaking. We were looking for you, actually. We saw your boss after you lost, and boy did he look sad. He was saying shit about how he was going to tear that BS a new one, or something like that. Takano paled upon hearing this. The big man was going to kill him, and he couldn't do anything about it. The blonde kid rolled his eyes before continuing. Luckily for you though, he sent me and my friend here. The kid motioned to his green-haired associate, who simply waved. We have a proposition for you. My friend here has a quirk that can take other quirks. You have 2 options. Either my associate takes your quirk, and you get to live, or you get killed by your boss. Your choice. Takana's eyes widened. They wanted his quirk? He doesn't even remember seeing these kids employed in the gang, but he figured that they must have been new hires. Fine. He snarled. I'll let you take my quirk. The blonde smirked and motioned to the green kid to do his thing. The boy stepped forward and placed a hand on Takana's forehead. Don't fight it. That was all the kid said before he started. Red energy danced around the boy's hand, and Takano felt his quirk being ripped away. After around 10 seconds, the red energy dissipated, and the green-haired boy stepped back, seemingly out of breath. The blonde kid dragged his friend out the door, only looking back to chuckle before leaving. That was odd, Takana thought. He couldn't remember seeing those kids ever associate with the gang. In fact, they didn't even have the branding on their faces. Takana's eyes widened, and he could only think of one thing. I was tricked. Furiously, Takana rushed towards the door, preparing to catch those kids. As he put his hand on the doorknob, though, the door slammed open, pushing Takana back slightly. Takana grunted and prepared to shove past the intruder, but just one look at who entered made him lose all of his momentum. It was the boss. Takana could only stare in horror. Tsuyu wasn't too sure what to expect when All Might asked her to meet him at Takoba Municipal Beach Park. It was decently far away from her house, but she figured that since she would be training with the #1 hero, she didn't need to do the usual training that she started to prepare for the practical exam. As Tsuyu approached her mentor, All Might noticed her and waved. "Ah, young Azui. How are you?" he asked. "I'm doing all right, sir. I am curious why we're here, Ribbit. This place is a bit of a dump." Tsuyu responded. Tsuyu was always known to be blunt, and this was no exception. Takoba was a dump. Trash was littered all around and more seemed to pile up each day. "I'm glad you asked," All Might replied. You see, being a hero in the old days was about helping the community rather than having a flashy power and being on commercials. For your training, I thought it would be perfect if you were to clean this place up. Not only would you be training muscle groups all around your body, but you would be serving this community in the process. The enthusiasm radiating off All Might was infectious, and Tsuyu couldn't help but get excited. She did have a few questions though. "Ribbit, I know training will be good for the entrance exam, but didn't you say I was already worthy of your quirk?" Tsuyu asked. "You are worthy in spirit, young Azui. However, you still need to prepare for one for all physically. The power has been stockpiled over decades, so an unprepared body cannot handle the sheer amount of power stored in the quirk." All Might explained. "In fact, if you were to accept the quirk now, your limbs would probably shoot off like a rocket." Upon hearing that, Tsuyu's eyes widened, something abnormal for the usually very stoic girl. One for all must be very powerful if it has that much force, Ribbit. Tsuyu thought to herself. "If you don't have any more questions, then I suggest we start." All Might exclaimed. Tsuyu nodded, both intrigued and excited for what the symbol of peace had planned. Tsuyu did not sign up for this. Okay, well maybe she did, but when All Might asked her to come to Takoba Beach for training, she was not expecting to tow refrigerators with a 600-pound man on top. All Might gasped in faux sadness. "Young lady, I'll have you know that I am down to only 560 pounds these days," All Might said with a chuckle. It had been around 2 weeks since they started the training. Tsuyu could tell that she was a little stronger, but it wasn't too noticeable. The frog girl had already been training for hero school since the start of middle school, so her strength was above average. This would certainly help though. As Tsuyu walked down to the train station after another day of school, she felt a familiar pair of eyes stalk her as she walked. Any normal person would be scared at the prospect of being stalked by someone, but not Tsuyu. The eyes felt familiar because they belonged to a certain snake she was great friends with. Habuko Mongoose. Habuko jumped out and gave Tsuyu a big hug. "Tsu, how are you?" she asked. "I'm doing good, Habuko," Tsuyu replied. It had been a while since the two have spoken outside of school, since Tsuyu left immediately after school ended to go to training. The two chatted as they made their way to the train station. "You've been busier these days, Tsu. Have you gotten a new training routine?" Habuko asked. Tsuyu debated telling her about Takoba, but she figured it wouldn't be a problem as long as she let All Might know. "Yeah, a bit. I met a new trainer, and I have been working with him to clean up Takoba Beach," Tsuyu replied. Habuko's eyes sparkled at the name of the beach. "Really?" she exclaimed, startling Tsuyu. "I've heard how pretty the beach used to be. Can I see? Please?" "Sure," Tsuyu said with a smile. "Let me just let my trainer know you will be with me today." Habuko jumped for joy upon hearing the frog girl's answer. As they took their seats on the train, Tsuyu pulled out her phone to let All Might know of her friend's appearance. "Tsu, hey All Might. Tsu, I wanted to let you know that my friend Habuko will be joining us." Sue, is that okay, Ribbit? That is perfectly fine, young Azui. All Might. I do request that you call me Tashinori or Yagi while your friend is here. All Might. Sue. Upon receiving her answer, Tsuyu put her phone in her pocket and talked with Habuko on the train. Once Tsuyu and Habuko arrived at the beach, All Might greeted them. Hello, young Azui. And you must be the friend she told me about. I am Tashinori Yagi. All Migu, Tashinori said. Habuko stopped gazing at the beach briefly to reply. Hello, sir. I am Habuko Mongoose. Thank you for allowing me to visit. All Might chuckled. No worried, young Mongoose. If you would like, you can join young Azui's training for today. After all, 2 heads are better than 1. Habuko's eyes lit up. I would love to, sir. All Might led her over to where Tsuyu was working, and the friends began to clean up the beach. Tsuyu couldn't help but reflect on how happy she was that she and Habuko were friends. While their first few interactions weren't exactly normal, she couldn't be happier that she had a friend by her side as she worked to become All Might's successor. She wouldn't trade this for the world. As Habuko waved goodbye and left, Tsuyu was left with All Might. Young Azui, before you go for the day, I wanted to discuss the training plan with you. All Might said. Sure, Ribbit. What do you have in mind? Tsuyu replied, tightening her head slightly. I want to help you build muscles outside of our usual meetings, so I took the liberty of creating this. All Might pulled a piece of paper out of his pocket, earning a confused look from the greenette. I call it the Aim to Pass, American Dream Plan. Think of it as a daily routine. He explained. The schedule itself wasn't too far off from Tsuyu's usual schedule. It just included an earlier wake-up time to go for a run and get some strength training before school and on days where she wouldn't go to the beach. Sounds good, sir. Tsuyu said. All Might simply flashed his signature smile as he turned around and left. After their last escapade in the fight club, Izuku and Bakugo stayed away for a couple months. In that time, they decided to train in a Quirk gym to build up their strength. Tendrils was an odd quirk to use. It took almost a month for Izuku to consistently control the 2 new appendages. It was difficult to build up quirk control while fighting Bakugo, so the boy planned to instead use tendrils whenever he could around the house. Many broken glasses and dented walls later, Izuku had a pretty good grasp on using the quirk. Sludge was easier by comparison. Izuku learned that he could control the quirk much better than the previous user, either because the original user never tried enough or because Izuku's main quirk gave him a more advanced quirk control. Sludge had little to no offensive capabilities, but it was useful whenever Izuku needed to slip into a tight area or needed to maneuver faster. 3.5 months after their first trip to the fight club, Izuku and Bakugo decided to go again and see if they could get lucky enough to have the opportunity to get another quirk. What are you going to look for this time, nerd? Bakugo asked. Izuku wasn't too sure. He had a good generalist quirk and a great infiltration quirk. Maybe something for mobility? He wouldn't mind getting a heavy hitter either, something with great offense. Either something offensive or something to help with my mobility, whichever we get first. Izuku replied. Bakugo hummed in response, and the two continued to walk towards the building. Upon reaching the arena and making it past the entrance guardway easier, the duo decided to sit and watch a few of the rounds to see what the contenders were like. There weren't too many contenders today, but a few caught Izuku's eye. First was an older man with 2 large insects flying around him. It looked like his quirk summoned them, but they didn't seem durable. Next was a middle-aged brunette woman with springs for legs, but she doesn't seem to be doing too well in the fights. While her skills are great, it doesn't look like she gets healed in between her fights. The third person was a cloaked figure using a shadow manipulation quirk. They seemed to be able to form complex shapes with shadows and even use them to attack. Lastly, a very buff-looking man with a punching quirk caught the duo's eyes. He seemed to be an adrenaline junkie, so getting him alone wouldn't be easy. As the days passed, the 4 Izuku had his eyes on fell out of favor for one reason or another. The insect man quit after his insects got squashed by another fighter. It seemed that his quirk was only controlling the insects, not summoning them. The cloaked figure disappeared one day. The buff man also disappeared, but people spoke about how he was last seen with a man in a green coat and a bird mask. Only one remained on Izuku's radar. Haruketsui. She finishes her fights quickly, with only a few able to last against the first onslaught of kicks. Despite this, though, she looks more and more injured every day, almost like she refuses to get treated for her injuries. It struck Izuku as odd. Why would such an amazing fighter refuse treatment? Izuku figured he would go and figure out why. After her latest match, he left to try and find her. She didn't seem to have a waiting room like the other contenders, so he scoured the lobby and back areas to see if he could find her. After looking around, he eventually found the fire escape door open. Peeking through to the outside, he found Ketsui sitting on the edge of the platform. She was looking down towards the alley, hair in front of her face. She turned around, alarmed at the intruder, but calmed down once she saw the green-haired boy. Curious, Izuku went over and sat down next to her. "It's you." She spoke softly. Izuku raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" he asked. "You've become something of an urban legend. The owner of the place said something about a green-haired kid showing up and taking Takana's quirk. No one really believed it, but a part of me hoped." Ketsui answered, playing with her hair as she answered. "Does that mean you wanted me to come back?" Izuku asked, not fully understanding Ketsui's speech. She smiles softly. "Yes. I want you to take my quirk." Izuku looked baffled. He jumped backwards and stood up. "Wait, you want me to take your quirk?" Ketsui nodded, and Izuku asked his follow-up question. "Why?" Ketsui sighed softly before explaining. "I used to be one of the best fighters in this club. Only a few people had bested me, and only a small percentage of them had an absolute victory. I was on top of the world. But then something changed. After one of my fights, as I was walking off the arena, I coughed up blood. My opponent hadn't landed a hit on me, so it couldn't have been an injury from that. Before I could figure out what was wrong, my vision went hazy and I blacked out." Izuku stared in shock but otherwise stayed quiet. "After I woke up, I left to get checked by a doctor. They performed an MRI and she looked like she was on the verge of sobbing." Izuku wasn't too sure what to do, so he decided to simply put his arm on the woman's shoulder. "You don't have to tell me if you don't want to," Izuku said softly, looking in her eyes and smiling. "No sniff, I want to," she replied. After taking a deep breath, she continued. "They found I have a tumor on one of my lungs. It can't be removed, and it will continue to eat away at my life until I die." Ketsui said grimly. "I decided that if I was going to die, I wanted it to be on my terms. That's why I fight. I want one of these fights to kill me." Izuku gasped. That's why she never wanted to be treated. She wanted to slowly break herself. There has to be another way." Izuku shouted. "I won't let you do this to yourself. I want to help you." Ketsui chuckled. "I'm sorry, kid. The doctors already told me that the tumor cannot be removed. That's why I want you to take my quirk. A part of me can live on inside you, and that is more than enough for me." She smiled weakly, as if she wasn't sure if she wanted to go through with this. "I'm going to try for you, eh? If I get in, I can ask Recovery Girl to help you. I know she will. Please, just stay alive," Izuku said desperately. Tears threatened to spill from his eyes, but he kept them at bay. Ketsui looked conflicted, but her eyes flickered with hope. "If you think so, kid. But I still want you to have my quirk. You'll need all the help you can get to be accepted." She held out her arm. Izuku looked at her, slightly tearing up, and accepted. Before Izuku left, he turned around. "By the way, do you think we can exchange numbers? I can let you know if I get in." "Sure thing, kid. What is your name? I think calling you kid will get old fast." Ketsui laughed. "Midoriya. Izuku Midoriya." It had been 8 months since Tsuyu had started training to inherit One for All. The beach was almost spotless, and Tsuyu had definitely gotten stronger as she worked. Habuko would occasionally join Tsuyu in cleaning the beach, but the majority of the cleanup was spent alone or with All Might's supervision. Tsuyu was also able to practice using her quirk more, though mostly with jumping. No force on earth could get the frog girl to grab garbage with her tongue. All Might instead had her work on holding her breath underwater for longer, cleaning the ocean in the process. After another day of school, Tsuyu went back to Takoba Beach to finish her job. There was only a little bit left, so Tsuyu figured she could knock it out before All Might arrived. Arriving at the beach, Tsuyu took a deep breath of the ocean air before walking down to the last bit of trash left. She put on gloves and started picking up junk from the pile. As she worked, Tsuyu thought back to everything that happened in the last 8 months. The bank robbery, meeting the symbol of peace, and the work she's put into inheriting his power. Her thoughts were interrupted by a loud voice. "The hell did you say, I'm a nerd?" A loud voice called out. Tsuyu turned around to see where the voice came from and immediately found her answer. "It's them again," Tsuyu thought. The boy in question had spiky blonde hair, and he was accompanied by his green-haired friend as usual. Tsuyu would often see the two of them walk by as she worked. The blonde one, were typically very loud, but Tsuyu often had a good chuckle at their arguments, like the one time they argued about whether or not Mirko could break Crust's shields. This argument was no different, though it focused more on whether the green boy could beat the blonde guy in a fight. The blonde boy was getting really heated in this argument, and he even started setting off sparks from his hands. He had the green-haired boy backed up against the railing of the walkway, frantically waving his arms. The explosive blonde got closer, and the freckled kid backed further into the railing. A loud sound came from the railing. The two boys stopped and looked at each other before the railing collapsed, taking the green-haired boy with it. Panicked, the boy attempted to grab the brick wall with some sort of black tentacle coming out of his back, and he latched onto the wall. In all honesty, it was a good save. Until it wasn't. The brick slid out of place, causing the greenette to start falling again. He landed face first onto the sand, groaning as he shakily got back up to his feet. Tsuyu took this time to run over there to check on him. "Are you okay?" Tsuyu asked, tilting her head slightly to examine him. The boy didn't seem to have any injuries, but he did have some impressive musculature. "Oh yeah, I'm okay. No need to worry," he said instantly before looking up to meet her eyes. "Whoa, it's you. You're the girl who's been cleaning the place up, right?" "Yep, that's me, Ribbit," Tsuyu responded. "My name is Tsuyu Azui, but you can just call me Tsu." The boy looked a bit red upon hearing Tsuyu's request but composed himself quickly. "I'm Izuku Midoriya, and my friend's name is Katsuki Bakugo. He's the one I was talking to up there," Midoriya said. As if being summoned, Bakugo walked into the conversation. "That's what you get for saying you can beat me in a fight." "Who's Frog Face?" Bakugo said, pointing at Tsuyu. "Kaken. You can't just say that, it's rude," Midoriya replied, waving his hands at the blonde. Tsuyu deadpanned a bit before answering. "My name is Tsuyu Azui. You can call me Tsu though." Bakugo scoffed before grabbing Midoriya's arm and dragging him off. "Come on, nerd, we need to train." "It was nice meeting you, Tsu," Midoriya called out as he was dragged out. "Kaken quit it," Midoriya said with a pout. Tsuyu watched until she could no longer see them. Adorable. A few hours later, Tsuyu had finally cleaned the entire beach. She was only meant to clean a specific section, but she figured she could do more, plus ultra style. As she set the last pit of trash into the cleanup pile, she heard a familiar voice. "Wow, young Azui. You've gone beyond what I set out for you to do," All Might said, walking over to her in his depowered form. "Great job." "Ribbit, thank you, sir," Tsuyu said with a smile. "You've grown so much from that day I met you. I'm honored to have seen your growth as a friend, student, and hero. I think it's about time for what I promised," All Might said, buffing up to his hero form. "It's time you inherit my quirk and become my successor. Do you accept?" Tsuyu thought back to everything she had done. The hours she spent on the beach cleaning until her muscles screamed for her to stop. The time she spent with her best friend. The way she got to meet that cute boy, Midoriya. Tsuyu knew that she was ready for this. Whatever came next, she would smile. "Yes, sir," Tsuyu said, brimming with confidence. "Very well," All Might said. He plucked out a single hair from his head and held it out in front of her. "Now, eat this." Tsuyu blinked. Tsuyu was no longer smiling. The next day, Tsuyu got a text from All Might. He said that now that she inherited one for all, she groaned at the reminder of eating the hair of the #1 hero. He wanted Tsuyu to train under his old mentor, a hero named Gran Torino. Tsuyu was intrigued hearing about her trainer predecessor's teacher, but something else struck her as odd. Even through text, she could sense immense fear coming from All Might. He was even stuttering in text, as if he made typos from shaking too much but was too afraid to notice. Whatever the case, she agreed to train under Gran Torino. Later that day, she met with All Might at the now trash-free Takoba beach. He was shaking intensely as he waved to her. Hello, young Azui," he said nervously. He opened his mouth to speak again but was interrupted by a voice from behind. "Aren't you gonna introduce me, brat?" The voice spoke. All Might paled as if he had seen a ghost. "Oh, of course, sir," All Might said. This is my old mentor, Gran Torino." He stepped aside to reveal the old man. He wore a yellow costume with a black mask on his face. "So, you're the brat Toshinori chose to inherit one for all," Gran Torino said, inspecting the girl. Tsuyu was unfazed. "Hello, sir, I'm Tsuyu Azui Ribbit. Pleased to meet you," Tsuyu said, bowing. "Very respectful. If only my previous student acted like you," Gran Torino remarked. All Might slumped over. "I'm glad he didn't decide to teach you himself. He's a great hero but a terrible teacher. He probably would have told you to clench your butt cheeks and yell, 'Smash,' to use one for all." Torino laughed. He looked over at his former student and immediately knew he was right. "Remind me to kick his butt later." Gran Torino sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. "Anyways," he turned to face Tsuyu with a grin. "Let's see what you've got." True to his word, Izuku stayed in contact with Ketsuki. He learned a lot about Ketsuki over the passing months, such as her love for first-person shooter video games and junk food. They became friends fast, and Izuku would even stop by her apartment to bring snacks or new video games. Izuku also kept up his training with Bakugo, slowly getting the hand of spring legs. With the added agility, he learned to react faster to attacks and kick even harder. Izuku felt ready for the entrance exam. With a newfound confidence, Izuku went to bed. But something was wrong. Izuku knew he was ready, so why did it feel like there was something missing? Well, 1 or 2 more quirks wouldn't hurt, right? Izuku woke up without any of his bedsheets on him. He looked over to his All Might alarm clock and read the time. For him, another nightmare, Izuku thought. Figuring he wouldn't be able to go to sleep again, Izuku got out of bed and hobbled over to his computer. With only 2 months until the entrance exam, Izuku figured going back to the Fight Club would be risky. As he thought of ideas to get more quirks legally, Izuku found himself scrolling through some online forums. He found they were the best way to get new information on new heroes and rewatch old hero fights. His favorite forum was one focusing on underground heroes. Seeing as Izuku had plenty of time before he needed to get ready for school, Izuku decided to browse longer than he usually would. This led him to a smaller community. Annoying Quirks, the place to talk about all your quirk-related struggles, Izuku said to himself. He had seen this forum occasionally but never looked inside it. Izuku was about to scroll past it when he thought of something. Wait, if these people are complaining about their quirks, then maybe they would want someone to take them away. Izuku quickly clicked on the community and began to scroll through the entries, looking for any that had users complaining about their own quirk. Most of the entries were about collateral damage that came from villain attacks. Endeavor happened to pop up in a lot of these, causing Izuku to grimace slightly. He was one of the most successful heroes, solving more cases than All Might himself. Despite this, it always seemed he had more focus on beating villains and less focus on protecting civilians, as if he thought he had something to prove. After searching for around 15 minutes, Izuku found someone. A man with the username Gramps. He had a quirk called Exponential. It allowed him to boost other people's quirks when he touched them based on how long he charged his quirk. He explained in his post that he's too old to use his quirk, since the energy needed to amplify someone's quirk even by 1.01% left him with too little energy. Izuku figured that a quirk like that would be great if he could amplify himself, and even if he couldn't, amplifying others in a battle would surprise villains. Once Izuku made up his mind, he sent a DM to the old man. Smallmite02, hey, I saw your post on annoying quirks and wanted to ask you a question. Smallmite02, if I told you I could take your quirk, would you accept? I'm trying for UA, and I think your quirk would be great for heroics. As Izuku waited for the man's response, he looked more for any other quirks people didn't want. Izuku's mind went into overdrive looking at all the cool quirks, thinking of all the possible ways they could be used in hero work. As he got to some of the earliest posts, he saw another one that caught his eye. A young man with a quirk called pancakes. It allowed him to make any kind of pancake using the fat stored in his body. The problem was that the man was allergic to eggs, so he would always have a reaction when using his quirk. He reached out in a similar manner to Gramps and logged off. Izuku was nervously waiting for a response from both the people he talked to last night, so when he felt a buzz in his pocket, he nearly jumped out of his seat. Looking at the notification, he saw it was from the pancake person. Pancake, for dude? That sounds awesome. Pancake, I'm free all week, so just let me know what time and place to meet. Smallmite02, awesome. Smallmite02, is there anything you want in exchange? I don't have much, but I can give you money or a different quirk if you'd like, laughing face. Izuku and Pancake started negotiating, and the two eventually settled on Izuku paying 7,000 yen for the quirk. While it would be a noticeable dent in his savings, Izuku was just glad he didn't ask for a quirk, considering he didn't have any to give. The two decided on meeting at a small park in Tokyo in 2 days. Smiling, Izuku finished the rest of his lunch and went back to class. He screenshot the conversation to solidify their deal. As soon as school ended, Izuku ran to find Bakugo. He wanted to tell his friend what he was doing, especially since it was his idea to get new quirks. Good news, Kaken? Izuku called out to his best friend. Bakugo turned to look at him. I was talking to someone online, and they offered to sell me their quirk. This caught the blonde's attention, especially since people usually like having their quirk. Oh, what kind of quirk did you buy? Bakugo asked. It's a quirk called pancakes. It'll allow me to make any kind of pancake using my fat storage. Izuku explained. Bakugo had to do a double take to make sure he was serious. Seriously? How's some stupid pancake quirk gonna help you become a hero? Bakugo asked, slightly irritated that his friend was paying for a seemingly useless quirk. Well, I could give pancakes to people I rescue if they need comforting, or I could make tough pancakes to throw at people. Izuku explained. Plus, I might have been hungry when I saw him complaining about it online. Izuku sheepishly added, earning a chuckle from his explosive friend. Well, it's up to you. I still don't see the use of having it. Bakugo said. Who knows, maybe I can use it to beat you in a fight. Izuku cheekily remarked, though he quickly regretted saying that. The hell did you say, I'm a nerd? Bakugo roared, causing Izuku to back up. I was just kidding, Kaken, honest? Izuku said, waving his arms to convince Bakugo. I'm gonna make you eat those words, then I'll eat those stupid pancakes too. Bakugo said, using his quirk to make sparks fly from his hand as he approached the green-haired boy. Izuku continued to back up until he felt the railing behind him on his back. As Bakugo continued to move forward, Izuku could hear slight noises coming from the railing, but he paid no mind to them, continuing to push back to get away from his enraged friend. The two looked at each other, Bakugo stopping his advance, as Izuku started to speak. Well, sure. Izuku couldn't finish his statement as the railing collapsed, sending him falling over the edge. He tried to grab onto a brick with tendrils, which seemed to work. That was until he heard the brick start to slide out of place. Izuku could only look in horror as the brick flew out, sending him hurtling towards the ground again. After Izuku hit the ground, he heard a voice coming from above him. Are you okay? The girl asked, tilting her head slightly. She looked to be his age and had green hair. Her eyes were larger than an average person's, and so were her hands. Honestly, she's really cute. Wait, where did that come from? With a slight blush, Izuku answered. Oh yeah, I'm okay. No need to worry. He looked up to her eyes, immediately recognizing her. Whoa, it's you. You're the girl who's been cleaning the place up, right? Yep, that's me, Ribbit. She replied. My name is Tsuyu Azui, but you can just call me Tsu. Izuku blushed again at the thought of calling a girl by her first name but quickly composed himself. I'm Izuku Midoriya, and my friend's name is Katsuki Bakugo. He's the one I was talking to up there. Izuku said. As if he heard his name, Bakugo instantly walked over to them. That's what you get for saying you can beat me in a fight. Who's frog face? Bakugo said, pointing at Tsu. Kaken. You can't just say that it's rude. Izuku shouted as he waved his hands. Tsu did not look amused, though she introduced herself just as she did for Izuku. Bakugo scoffed before grabbing Izuku's arm and dragging him off. Come on, nerd, we need to train. It was nice meeting you, Tsu. Izuku called out as he was dragged out. Kaken quit it. He said with a pout. Today was the day Izuku would get his next quirk. He got ready and said goodbye to his mom before heading out. He was excited to meet Pancake, but he was more excited to get a new quirk, something quirk manipulation seemed to agree with. As he walked into the park, he looked for the man he was meeting and ended up finding him on a bench in a secluded part of the park. Hey, you're Pancake, right? Izuku asked. Yep, that's me. He responded. Izuku sighed in relief, thinking about how awkward it would have been if he got it wrong. Pulling out the money, Izuku started talking. So, are you ready? Yeah, let's do this. Pancake said with a grin. Izuku handed the money and placed his hand on Pancake's forehead. You're going to feel like something is being ripped out of you. If you don't fight it, it won't hurt. Izuku explained as red energy began dancing around his arm. Pancake nodded and closed his eyes. After only 7 seconds, it was done. It's done, Izuku said, panting a little. Okay, well, looks like this is goodbye. Make sure to let me know when you get in. Pancake called out before turning around, leaving Izuku to ponder what he had said. He sounded so confident in me. Even knowing my quirk, he didn't scream or call me a villain or anything. Izuku started tearing up slightly. I'll get in, I know I will. After calming down, Izuku tested the new quirk. Sure enough, as soon as he activated it and thought of a pancake, one came out of his hand and landed on the ground. Excited, Izuku jotted down several ideas to practice. There was so much he wanted to try, but there was one person Izuku needed to visit. Bakugo was doing homework in his room when he heard a strange sound coming from his window. It didn't sound like any bird he knew, and it definitely wasn't the wind. Curious, Bakugo got up from his desk and opened the window. He saw a pancake with the word payback written on it in syrup. Deku! Shut up, brat. Bakugo's mom yelled. Listen up, shrimp. Gran Torino said. There's only 2 months until the UA entrance exam. We'll need you to get some control over One for All before then. The old hero paused briefly before grinning. I'll try and help you channel One for All's power through you, and then I'll teach you the same way I taught the blonde oaf. All Might gulped upon hearing that, but Tsu paid no mind. If she was to master this new power, who better to teach her than All Might's old teacher? Yes, sir. Tsuyu replied promptly. What will you be having me do, Ribbit? From what All Might and his former master have told me, One for All feels like a surge of energy that goes straight through your veins. Try drawing out that power. You'll be able to feel the quirk flowing through your veins when you've got it. Gran Torino said. For now, try and focus the power into one of your limbs. Feel free to sit down or do whatever you need to do to help yourself. Tsuyu nodded and sat on the sand, crossing her legs and closing her eyes. Frog was an easy quirk to understand since it is a mutant quirk. Looking into herself, Tsuyu felt it. An immense well of power that wasn't there before. Tsuyu reached out and drew out the power, sending it to her legs. Opening her eyes, Tsuyu saw her legs glowing a bright red. Well, color me impressed, shrimp. You managed to do it. Gran Torino remarked. It's good that you can access that power, but you'll need to be able to draw it out quicker. Let the energy diffuse back into yourself and try again. Keep going at it until you can draw that power out without having your eyes closed. Then do it standing up. This is the first step to getting control of One for All. Tsuyu looked back to All Might, who was smiling. Yes, sir. Tsuyu said with confidence. From what I've seen, you picked a good successor, Toshinori. Gran Torino said. It has been around 2 hours since the old hero gave Tsuyu her assignment. She had gotten to the point where she could draw up the power of one for all rather quickly with her eyes open, but she was struggling to do it standing up. She's got a good work ethic and a strive to do better. She's also very respectful and level-headed. Gran Torino looked at his former student. Nana would have loved her. All Might frowned slightly hearing the name of his former master. I hope so. After a moment of silence, All Might perked up. Enough reminiscing for now. What do you suggest we do once young Azui is able to access one for all in her legs standing up? Gran Torino paused for a moment to think. We should have her do the same in her arms. Then, I want to do some sparring. Gran Torino put 2 fingers on his chin before continuing. I'm worried that one for all's power will be too much for her, even after preparing for 8 months. So instead of asking her to use it in combat, I want to test her reaction time and prowess with her original quirk. The two looked over to see that Tsuyu was able to control the power in her legs. They smiled before standing up. Let's go give young Azui her next assignment then. All Might said, walking over towards his successor. As he took a step forward though, he was stopped by a hand on his shoulder. He looked back to see his teacher with a grim expression. Have you told her anything about the first user? About how the quirk came to be? About him? Gran Torino asked. No. At least not yet. I'm hoping to never have to tell her about that monster. He's dead. I made sure of that myself. All Might said. Gran Torino frowned. Even though he's dead, you should still tell her. Keeping a secret this big will cause troubles for you and her. Gran Torino looked down, remembering the tough decision he and Nana had to make all those years ago. Did we make the right choice all those years ago, old friend? I'll tell her once she gets into you. All Might said sternly. Gran Torino looked up and nodded. Now, let's go and teach my successor. Gran Torino chuckled. As long as you don't tell her to do anything reckless. All Might stuttered as Gran Torino continued laughing. Tsuyu has worked up quite the sweat controlling one for all. Holding back such an immense amount of energy is no easy feat, but she has finally been able to control it enough to let the energy flow into her legs and arms. Upon hearing the sound of footsteps in the sand, she looked up to see Gran Torino and All Might. Good work, kiddo. You really are a natural at this. Gran Torino said with joy. Now, there's one more thing I want to do today before we call it quits for the day. I want to get a feel for your reflexes and timing, so we're going to do some sparring. Gran Torino grinned upon saying that, filling Tsuyu with uneasiness. Maybe All Might was right to be worried. Tsuyu though to herself, shuddering slightly. On the outside, however, she remained composed. All right, Ribbit. Tsuyu replied, bending down and getting into a battle stance on all fours. Let's do this. Gran Torino looked at the conviction in his student's protege and smiled. Doing some quick leg stretches, he bent down and jumped, disappearing into a cloud of air and sand. Tsuyu scanned the air for her teacher but saw no sign of him. That is until she felt a boot strike from behind. Gran Torino laughed as he kicked Tsuyu to the ground, going into the sky once again. Tsuyu groaned and got into her stance again, looking around for Gran Torino again. She would hear her teacher land on the ground but be gone as soon as she looked. He was relentless, kicking from behind whenever she let her guard down enough. I can't even see this guy, let alone hit him, Tsuyu thought. A blur passed by her face, but the responding kick from the green was too slow. He prioritizes attacks from my blind spots. His attacks seem random, but they are actually coordinated, which means they have a pattern. She looked over to a blur from behind. 1. She turned around again, seeing her mentor fly past her yet again. 2. After a bit, she heard the hero land right behind her. Now! Tsuyu pushed off from the ground, launching her tongue at the space right in front of where she was. Just as she predicted, Gran Torino flew past and was hit by her tongue. Gran Torino fell onto the ground and slid in the sand before stopping. Tsuyu prepared to launch her tongue again to ensnare her teacher, but with a huge puff of wind, he was gone. Tsuyu felt another kick to her back, and she fell face first onto the sand. This time, she didn't have the strength to get back up. Not bad, kid. Gran Torino said, helping the frog girl up. Nice job picking up on my attack pattern. You've clearly got a good head on your shoulders. Tsuyu smiled at the praise. Thank you, sir. Tsuyu said, trying to balance on her feet. Let's call it quits for today. I'm not sure what Toshinori will have you do tomorrow, but I want you to come over to my house the following day to continue training. Is that okay with you? Once Tsuyu nodded, Gran Torino continued. Alright, now go ahead and get some rest. I'll let All Might know what he should do tomorrow. Tsuyu nodded and started walking up to the road. Gran Torino watched her and smiled. You really did pick a good one, Toshinori. Izuku kept checking his phone for an update from Gramps, but he hasn't said anything. He was starting to have doubts about the entrance exam. What if he wasn't ready? What if the quirks he has now isn't enough? What if he needs him? What if... Izuku was interrupted from his spiral when he felt a nudge from Bakugo. Looking up, Izuku remembered that he was still at school, sitting at his desk even after the final bell rang. You good nerd? Bakugo asked with indifference, though Izuku could tell there was some concern hidden behind that facade. Yeah, sorry Kaken. Izuku replied, sheepishly rubbing the back of his head. I was just thinking about the entrance exam. Bakugo hummed in response. The exam was only a month away, so it was natural for him to be nervous. Just remember all the work you put in. You and I are the only ones from this dump going to you, don't you forget it, Deku. Izuku looked up and faintly smiled, but it seemed forced. What else is bothering you, nerd? I know there's something else you aren't telling me about. Bakugo said with a sigh. Izuku silently cured at having such an attentive friend before answering. Well, a month or so ago I contacted someone on an online forum about their quirk, since they had posted about finding it annoying, but I haven't heard anything back yet. What kind of quirk? Bakugo asked. The post said it's called exponential. It allowed him to charge an energy inside himself that could enhance the quirks of people he touched. It would be useful for me to have Anikanalredithing Kofsamini dash, Izuku stated before devolving into a mutter storm. A quirk jab from Bakugo snapped him out of it. Seems useful. If this guy is serious about not liking his quirk, I'm sure he'll let you know. And if he never sends anything back, just know you already have nothing to worry about. We are almost equal in terms of power, and I know for a fact that I'm gonna ace this exam. Bakugo said with confidence, causing a slight chuckle from Izuku. Thanks, Kaken. Izuku said with a smile. Whatever. Let's get out of here already, I want to go home. Bakugo quipped. Izuku nodded and got up from his chair, making sure to grab everything. He left school that day feeling more confident than ever before. Izuku collapsed onto his bed with a sigh. Homework took up so much of his time, and all he wanted to do now was lie in bed. He pulled out his phone to scroll through HeroTube but noticed something else instead. A new notification from Far appeared. Izuku almost fell out of his bed when he read that and quickly opened the app to read what it was. Gramps, hey Sonny. Sorry for the long wait, but I'd be happy to meet with you. I was talking with the other folks I live with, and they said they would be happy to meet with you too. I live in a small village outside Mido, so let me know when you're stopping by. Izuku couldn't believe his eyes. Not only did Gramps want to give away his quirk, but he found others too. Izuku immediately responded, and the two set up a meeting time that weekend. Squealing in delight, Izuku rushed over to his notebook and began planning the applications of exponential. Before that though, he reminded himself to let Bakugo know of the arrangement. With confirmation that his explosive friend would be there, Izuku let himself get drafted into his notebook until he fell asleep. Arriving at the address Gramps sent him, Izuku and Bakugo went in. The old wooden building looked in slight disrepair, having areas where the off-blue paint was scratched off. The house had only one story, but it was a large property. The floor creaked with every step, filling the two teens with a feeling of paranoia. As Izuku prepared to step through a set of double doors, he was stopped by a voice. I was wondering when you'd get here. The voice said. Izuku and Bakugo jumped in shock, though Bakugo will forever deny this. The old man chuckled before continuing. Sorry for startling ya. Couldn't help myself. So, I take it you're Small Might? The old man asked. When Izuku nodded he continued. Great. I'm Gramps, but feel free to use my name, Tsutono-han. Izuku lit up hearing the man's name. It's nice to meet you, Han. I'm Izuku Midoriya, and this is my best friend Katsuki Bakugo. Izuku pointed towards his friend as he introduced him. Han laughed at the introduction. You're a lively one. Well then, let's get into business. Izuku went serious then as he listened to the old man. As you know, my quirk is called exponential. I used to be able to charge myself with an energy that I could transfer to others, temporarily amplifying their quirk. I used to get into quite a bit of trouble using it. Han sighed, reminiscing on when he was younger. Now, my quirk is too taxing for me to use, so I'm more than happy to give a young fellow like yourself the opportunity to use it. Izuku smiled brightly. Thank you, sir. I promise I won't let you down. Han chuckled before continuing. No need to be all formal, young man. I also wanted to tell you a bit about this place. This retirement home houses all sorts of people, and a lot of the people here also face similar struggles with their quirks. Some are also retired pro heroes who were forced out of their jobs after a terrible injury. After I received your message, I went around and asked around to see if more would be willing to give you their quirks, and a few agreed. Izuku looked taken aback. Sir. Thank you so much. Izuku said with a bow. There must be something I can do to repay you, right? I said no need to be formal, kid. Han said. No need for repayment. We're just happy that someone sees the use of our quirks and will put them into use for the betterment of Japan. As long as you can promise us that, we are more than happy to let you use our power. Izuku turned serious and replied. Of course. I've always dreamt of being a hero. I promise to use your powers for that purpose. The conviction in his voice left no room for doubt. Han smiled. Glad to hear it, Midoriya. Now, let me introduce you two to the others. There were 5 people, including Han, that wanted to give away their quirks. First was a mutant quirk called Anoli, which gave the user the abilities of an Anoli. These were cling pads on the fingers and a long tail that could be detached. This would be great for reconnaissance and infiltration, and the autonomy could be useful to surprise attackers. Next was an emitter quirk called Acupressure. This allowed the user to create small needles on their fingertips that could relieve pain. And STMLT nerves where the therapy was applied. This quirk actually belonged to a retired pro hero named Pressure Point. She was very surprised about how much Izuku knew about her. The third quirk is called Tight Jaw, an emitter quirk that allows the user to increase their jaw strength, allowing them to clamp onto targets. While it didn't seem very useful, Izuku figured that he could use it to bite through obstacles. This quirk also belonged to a retired pro hero. His hero name was Chomper, a sidekick who used to work under Rocklock until his lower jaw was severed in a villain attack. The last quirk is called Last Resort, an emitter quirk that removes muscle limiters from the user in times of great duress. The catch was that the muscle fibers of the user would tear under the stress, but that kind of burst strength would be amazing to make a last stand. As he looked through his library of quirks, Izuku realized the voice asking for more vanished. He smiled, finally feeling ready for the entrance exam. His thoughts were interrupted by a call from his mom, however. Excusing himself, Izuku stepped outside the building to take the call. Hey mom, what's up? Izuku asked. Hi Izuku. I wanted to tell you something important. I got word from the hospital, and your father wants to see you. Inko said. Izuku tensed upon hearing mention of his father. He hadn't seen the man in years after an incident that happened whilst he was abroad in America. He's been in the hospital for around 6 years since, but Izuku rarely visited. He isn't too sure what to think of his father right now. He remembers the kind words his father spoke when he was 4, but he never stuck around, only supporting the family through money sent from overseas. Hey mom, do you want to go tomorrow? Izuku asked, wanting to get this out of the way. He doesn't hate his dad, but he doesn't understand why he requested to meet after so long. Yes, that would be good. Inko replied. Izuku said goodbye and hung up. Upon doing so, Izuku sat on the ground and leaned his head on the wall of the retirement home. What could his father possibly want to talk about? For the time being, Izuku had no idea. He went back inside and told Bakugo and the others that he was leaving. They said their goodbyes before Izuku departed. Tomorrow would be fine, right? Working for the #1 hero in America was a nice gig while it lasted. Analysis work was much more popular in the States than in Japan, and the Verdant Dragon was considered one of the best. At least that's what Hisashi Midoriya always told himself. His work made takedowns much easier for Stars and Stripes, so when he was asked to investigate a mole in the agency, it should have been easy. However, during his last mission, Hisashi made 2 mistakes. The man was named William Schmitter. Hisashi was suspicious of him for a long time but never had any proof. His quirk, endoskeleton, made IT work a cinch. It allowed him to open a part of his skin to reveal a fully robotic inside. He was able to work well with computers and anything related to technology, which also made him the perfect rat. Hisashi was finally able to catch him in the act though. By using a fake, top-secret document on an isolated computer, Hisashi was able to track down William and get proof that he was in fact the mole. Hisashi thought to get Star or one of her sidekicks, but he made his first mistake. He went after William himself. After sending the proof of William's disloyalty to Star, he went over to the computer to confront William himself, missing Star's message to let her do it. If William was anywhere near as smart as Hisashi thought, he would know by now that he was tricked. Hisashi needed to move now to make sure William doesn't run away. Rounding the corner, Hisashi walked into the room he set the trap in. It was an unused janitor's closet he slightly refurbished to look like an office. It was obviously a trap, but he figured William would be desperate enough to take that risk. Sure enough, standing at the sole computer in the room, Michael was there, a finger turned into a USB drive stuck right into the computer. "What you doing there, buddy?" Hisashi called, causing William to freeze. The traitor slowly turned around to face Hisashi. "Well, I thought I'd have longer, all things considered." William mumbled, mostly to himself. "I take it this trap was your idea?" "Yep." Hisashi said, popping the P. "Did a good job too, considering it caught Mr. IT Genius." This caused a scowl to form on William's face. "You haven't caught shit." William snapped back, slowly unraveling skin on his hand to let his quirk out. "Either get out of my way or die. Your choice." Hisashi took a step forward, smoke fuming out of his mouth. "My son wants to be a hero, so what kind of father would I be if I didn't give him a good role model?" That was Hisashi's second mistake. Star gave him permission to use his quirk should he need it on this investigation, but he never should have had to. William smirked before swinging his arm back and sending forward a stream of wire. Hisashi rolled out of their way and retaliated with a fire breath sent straight towards the wire, forcing William to recoil. "Star not pay ya enough or something? Why are you doing this?" Hisashi yelled as he dodged another attack. "It was never about money. I just want this stupid society to crumble at my hands as I torture everyone who called me a freak." William said as he sent a few wires into the lighting whilst attacking with the other hand. Hisashi could only frown as he took in a deep breath and sent a stream of fire straight at William. He was able to dodge the blast, but his attacking arm took some serious damage. Wincing, William started channeling his quirk through his leg. Seeing an opportunity, Hisashi ran forward and kicked William in the stomach, sending him into the wall. Hisashi walked over and pinned him to the wall, panting heavily but still smirking. "You're finished. Star will be here any second now," Hisashi stated, keeping his grip on William firm. "Anything to say for yourself, filth?" William simply started laughing a cold, depraved laugh. "Sensei would be furious with me if he found out I lost to some stupid analyst." Settling down, William looked Hisashi dead in the eyes. "You think you've won? There's one thing you must not know about me then." Suddenly, a large mechanical tendril stabbed Hisashi straight through the chest. Hisashi coughed out blood and fell over. "I always come back." William started cackling madly again, kicking Hisashi to the floor as he bled out. "Well, this was fun, though I should be going." William sent one last smirk towards Hisashi as he started to walk out of the room. "No," Hisashi said, slowly fading in and out of consciousness. "Think, damn it. What can I do?" Looking to his left, he saw a long metal stick that must have been from William's final attack. He used his quirk to blow fire on the metal, heating it until the tip was glowing a bright orange. Sitting up and leaning on the wall, Hisashi poured all his strength into his arm and through the pole. William turned around to check on the noise and could only widen his eyes as the pole flew at him, impaling him in his right eye. He screamed in pain as the hot metal burned the inside of his eye, eventually collapsing from the pain. "Come back from that, yesterday," Hisashi said, chuckling softly at a joke no one else heard. He sent his location and an emergency alert to the agency's network before finding something to cover the now purple wound on his chest. By the time Stars and Stripes arrived with some of her sidekicks, Hisashi was already unconscious. Hisashi groggily woke to the sound of a heartbeat monitor and the smell of saline. He heard a nurse yell something about his being awake, but he couldn't focus on anything right now. He put a hand up to his head as he felt a headache coming on. Suddenly, Stars and Stripe burst through the door. "You're awake," she said as tears slowly crept down her face. Hisashi chuckled. "You miss me?" he said, wincing at the sudden pain that came from talking. This earned him a flick from the #1 hero. "You idiot. You could have died," she said, much more somber than before. Hisashi became grim remembering the events that landed him here. "Yeah, I could have," Hisashi said. He then looked her in the eye with a new resolve. "But I don't regret anything." "Ah, good to see you're awake, Mr. Midoriya," a new voice from the back said. Star and Hisashi looked over to see the doctor. "I'm glad too," Hisashi said. The doctor nodded. "Shall I get into your report then?" Once Hisashi nodded, the doctor continued. "To be frank, it's a miracle you're still alive. You were stabbed through your lung. If William were a few centimeters higher with that strike, he would have hit your heart. If that were it, then you would be discharged in a couple months, but something else is wrong. I'm not sure it's William's quirk, but the stab area is almost infected with a flesh-eating virus that's turning your skin purple." He motioned to Hisashi's torso. Hisashi lifted the covers to see that a distinct purple has sprouted on his chest. "Even with all the technology we have, we can't get rid of it without killing you. By our estimations, you only have around 5 years to live if you get lucky." The mood instantly soured. Star started to tear up again and Hisashi could only stare in disbelief at the mark on his skin. "I'll leave you two for now. If you have any questions, feel free to call for me." With that, the doctor left. "Don't cry, Star." Star let out a shuddered breath and turned to Hisashi. "I did this to myself." Despite the situation he was in, he still beamed a bright smile. "I'm sorry, Hisashi. I should have been faster." Star said. "Please, if there's anything I can do, let me know." Hisashi blinked once before softly laughing. "Continue being a great hero for America, that's what I want." As he said this, he looked down. "I just wish I could still support my family. They're still in Japan. My son is only 9 for Christ's sake." Hisashi let out a sob, thinking about the situation he left his family in. Star placed a hand on his shoulder, causing him to look up. "Please, let me help support your family. It's the least I can do to repay your service to not just my agency, but to the country as well." Now it was Hisashi's turn to tear up, but he held back to prevent any water damage to the hospital. "Thank you," Hisashi said, smiling. Once Hisashi was stabilized a few weeks later, he was transferred to Mizutofu General Hospital with the help of Stars and Stripe. Once he was there, the attendants let his family know of his condition. They visited the next day with many tears. As Inko and Izuku were about to leave, Hisashi called out, "Hey kiddo!" Hisashi yelled, causing Izuku to turn around and look at him. "Keep working towards your dream. I know you'll be an amazing hero." More tears threatened to spill from father and son, but they held strong. Izuku nodded before turning back towards his mom and leaving. As the days went by, Hisashi's condition continued to get worse. His wife and son continued to visit, but as the days went by, Izuku's visits became less and less frequent, until it was just his wife visiting once a week. Star stayed true to her word and continued to support the Midoriyas in any way she could, even visiting once in a while to check up on her former employee. Hisashi sighed as another mundane day came and went. He missed his life before everything changed. Now, he was almost fully purple, with just his head remaining as his original tone. Hisashi could only wait until death came for him now. Until then, he'd get some shut-eye until the next day. The last time we met, I told you something about myself. Hisashi immediately opened his eyes and looked towards the origin of a voice he remembers as clear as day. I told you I always come back. Sitting at the edge of his hospital bed was William Schmitter. He was now donning a new scar on his eye from where Hisashi impaled him. He smirked as he looked at Hisashi's broken body. Come to finish the job. Hisashi scoffed. Hardly. William said. I'm only here to remind you of your failures until you die. Shouldn't be too much longer by my estimations. William grinned, sending a shiver down Hisashi's spine. You aren't looking like yourself either, you know. That scar is looking pretty painful. Hisashi said with a smirk. On death's door and still running your mouth. William grumbled. Your son's still working towards being a hero? You did tell me about him when we last faced each other. Yeah, he's working hard. Not like you really care. Hisashi said. I suppose you are right. William scoffed. I wonder if he'll turn out just like his dead old dad. Don't you dare say anything about my son. Hisashi said through his teeth as smoke threateningly danced around his mouth. William simply smiled. Or what? Your legs don't even work anymore, and I know for a fact that I punctured a lung. Well, maybe not me, but there's no way you're getting out of here without being captured. Hisashi said smugly. To that, William laughed. Of course I will. Want to know why? William said. Hisashi looked confused but nodded for him to keep going. Because I don't even exist. As soon as Hisashi blinked, the man sitting at the foot of his bed was gone, as if he were never there. Hisashi picked up his pillow and sobbed into it. There wasn't much time left, and there was one more thing he needed to do. Izuku wasn't too sure what to make of this impromptu visit his dad requested. His mom seemed excited, but Izuku was still uneasy. So much has changed in 5 years. Would he still approve of what he's done with his quirk? A part of him wishes his dad never tried to fight that person who put him in the hospital. He would still be in America, but at least he would be out of the hospital. Arriving at the hospital, Izuku and his mom greet the receptionist and walk over to Hisashi's room. Once the nurse announces to his father that he has visitors, Izuku and Inko step into the room. Hey Inko, how are you? Hisashi asked. I'm good, honey. Inko replied. I brought Izuku too. She gestured to their son. Hi kiddo. How's my green bean doing? Hisashi asked playfully. I'm okay. Izuku replied hesitantly. It was clear that Hisashi didn't buy it, but he didn't press for more. High school's coming up, right? Are you excited? Hisashi asked. Izuku froze up a bit. How would he explain all the quirks he has now? Why, it's a little nervous, but Kaken and I have been preparing well. Izuku explained. Still friends with Kaken, huh? Hisashi laughed, causing Izuku to blush. Well, he's one of the only people who doesn't hate my quirks so Izuku started to explain but then stopped abruptly, realizing he said a bit more than he wanted to. Hisashi narrowed his eyes. What do you mean people hate your quirk? Hisashi asked with an aura of murder surrounding him. Both Izuku and Inko felt a drop of sweat slide down their faces. A lot of the kids say that my quirk is meant for a villain. Izuku said cautiously. Well, I think that's a load of crap. Your quirk has an infinite number of possibilities, and I'm sure you've got a whole bunch ready for the exam. Hisashi said with a grin. So, what kind of quirks are you packing inside ya? Izuku shifted nervously. Promise not to get mad? Hisashi chuckled. I'll only get mad if you give me a reason to. If you think I'm gonna get mad at how many quirks you have, you've got another thing coming. With a sigh of relief, Izuku pressed on. I have 9 not including quirk manipulation. Sludge, tendrils, spring legs, pancakes, exponential, annoli, acupressure, tight jaw, and last resort. As Izuku listed off each quirk, He did a small demonstration for each one as Hisashi nodded along. What do you think? Izuku looked up to his dad only to see that he started muttering about the utility of each quirk. Inko chuckled fondly, seeing that the apple clearly didn't fall far from the tree. Something in the mumbling caught Izuku's ear, that being the mention of his dad's quirk. Wait, I don't have your quirk, Dad. Izuku said. Hisashi looked up and chuckled, sheepishly rubbing the back of his head. Whoops. Sorry, kiddo, I got a bit carried away. That does bring me to my next question, though. Hisashi stated. I'll be real with you, I don't have much time left. This admission caused Izuku to gasp and Inko to tear up. Once the purple disease gets to my head, I'll be gone. But before I go, I have one last ask of you. Hisashi looked his son dead in the eyes as he spoke. I want you to take my quirk, Fire Breath. I want you to use it to be the hero you've dreamt of, and the hero I never got to be. Izuku had to think the words in his head before he caught on. What? I can't do that. Izuku said, hastily waving his arms in front of himself. No need to be so loud, kid. Hisashi chuckled. I know you might feel bad about it, but I want you to do it. He spoke with unrivaled resolve. I don't know. It feels so wrong. Izuku admitted. Hisashi let out a sigh. Look, do you remember what I said about how I want you to be the hero I never got to be? Izuku nodded. Well, when I was young, I wanted nothing more than to be a hero. I wanted to make people happy and put a smile on their faces. But my peers didn't think I had it in me. They said that my quirk wasn't suited for it, and in the end, I let those words get to me. I went into analysis instead, where I ended up meeting your mother. Both parents smiled fondly at the happy memory. Look, the point is, I let those kids decide my future. While I'm perfectly happy with how things turned out in the end, I don't want that for you. I want you to live your life the way you choose to, and if having my quirk makes it easier for you to reach that dream, then it belongs to you. Once Hisashi finished, Izuku started tearing up again, moved by his father's words. Okay, Dad. If it makes you happy, I'll do it. Hisashi smiled and nodded. Izuku put his hand on his dad's forehead, and red energy danced around the boy's arm. After only 5 seconds, Hisashi was rendered quirkless. Thank you, Izuku. Hisashi said warmly. He lifted up his arms and the two embraced. Izuku let all his tears out. Thanks, Dad. I love you. Izuku said. Hearing those words made Hisashi light up. Love you too, kiddo. Izuku and Inko stayed for another half an hour before they had to leave, isolating Hisashi with his thoughts once again. It's admirable how much you care for them. A snide voice spoke. But if your quirk couldn't beat me, what's that boy going to do against someone much stronger? Hisashi turned to William. He's full of surprises, just watch. I know the kid will do great things. A chuckle came from William. Seems so. The two sat in silence before William spoke up again. You know your time is almost up, right? Yeah, I know. You don't seem very upset or scared. William remarked. I knew this was going to happen for a long time. I've accepted my fate, though I only hope Izuku and Inko can accept it too. William let out a snort. From what you've said, I have no doubt they will be fine. Hisashi looked at the man confused. Since when are you so supportive? Since you've accepted your position. I was nothing more than your inner demons personified. With another blink, William disappeared. Hisashi smiled softly before closing his eyes again, never to open them again. Doctors rushed in to stabilize him, but it was too late. Hisashi Midoriya died on February 21st, 20XX at 10:03 p.m. The funeral was relatively small. Hisashi didn't have family outside Inko and Izuku, so the only participants were the Midoriyas, the Bakugos, and members of Star and Stripes Agency. Izuku spent almost 10 minutes fanboying over the hero. Once everyone was here, the ceremony began, and Hisashi's body was lowered into the grave. There were many tears and condolences, and after the ceremony the attendees confided to talk amongst themselves. So, my dad worked for you, right? Star looked over to the voice to see Hisashi's son, Izuku, if she remembered correctly. He did. One of my best and most trusted employees. Star said with a smile. The analysis he did was second to none. I was almost jealous of his smarts. Star admitted, earning a light chuckle from the boy. That's good to hear. You know, you're almost a spitting image of your pops. And from the way you were fanboying earlier, I bet you have the same mind he did. Izuku blushed at the compliment and from being called out for his fanboying. He would always talk about you and your mom. He had such faith in you and your dreams, and from what I've seen in the short time I've known you, he was spot on. Izuku felt tears coming on again but fought to keep them under control. Keep working hard, and if you ever find yourself in need of a hero agency in the States, I'm a call away. The tears Izuku fought to keep under control came barreling out, earning him a teasing glare from Katsuki. Thank you. I work hard and become the hero he always saw in me. Izuku said, balling his fist and holding it out in front of him. Star chuckled at the boy's conviction. She saw herself in him, and in some ways she saw her mentor in him as well.